here and praise you for who you are, regardless of what's gone on in our lives this week. I pray, God, that you be with each of us as we spend some time together as a family, as a body, as your church. Call us into worship and help us to deal with any distractions that are here, that we can just focus on you this morning. Pray that you use this worship to guide us to your throne and guide us to your Spirit's convicting presence in our lives, that we can change and be more like you. We love you so much, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen. So glad you guys are here with us this morning. Why don't you take a minute, stand up, stretch a little bit. We're getting a little quiet here. You can stretch a little bit. Find somebody you haven't said hi to yet and shake their hand. just to point your attention to. You can look in your bulletin on the middle page and see some of those. First of all, we do want to celebrate this week. Christian was voted in last week as our minister to students, and we're so excited about what God's doing inside of our church with him and all the things that he's got going on. In fact, one thing that you can see at the very bottom of your bulletin, it says learn more at wetmorebc.com. That happens to be our new website that Christian put together for the week, so he's ridiculous like that. So there are great things to people like Christian coming in and being a part of our church. So if you want to, you can visit that website. It's awesome. He's done a great job on it. It's still in progress with some things added to it, but it's really good in my opinion. So I think he did a great job on it. But also we have coming up next Sunday, we have our day we're going to recognize our seniors graduating high school. So we're going to be recognizing a few of them. We got Spencer, we got Kiara. We're going to hopefully get to honor them a little bit and do some stuff. We're very excited about that, so make sure you guys come and celebrate with us what God's doing inside of them. And then also coming up, we have a wedding coming up on the 20th. We got our couples back here. This is Michael and Jennifer. If you haven't met them yet, you need to. They're pretty decent folk. I like them. They're all right. So if you haven't met them yet, make sure you go say hi to them and tell them that they're here. But their wedding's coming up on the 20th. Very excited about that. Lastly, on the 21st, we're doing a high attendance day for our Sunday school. Our goal is to see 50 people on that day in our Sunday school. Everyone now attending we're asking you guys to invite at least one other person to come to Sunday school that day. So that's going to be on May 21st. And our goal is, again, 50 people. That's not at all insurmountable for us. So especially if everyone in here said that I know one person who I could ask to come and be a part of my small group, my Bible study with me, then we would easily reach that goal. So if everyone wants to think ahead to that, and you have some planning time now of 3 weeks until this time to think through who you'd like to invite, who you think could come with you, and have somebody that can come and be a part of your class. Now, some of you might need to give a warning for the weirdness of your Sunday school class. I know you're teachers, and we have some strange ones, but that's okay. And so you might just need to warn them, hey, we're a little strange here, we're different, but we'd like you to come anyway. So anyways, make sure you invite somebody to come on the 21st for that, and we're very excited about it. Again, I'm so thankful you guys are here to worship with us today. Let's continue to worship this morning.
Let's sing together hymn number 573. 573.
Friend.
hymns. First of all, hymn number 16. Number 16.
Sunday school, how we have from the scripture, we see in class and discuss. We thank you for the time we have to worship in the song. We thank you for the music, hear the instruments playing. music that they bring to us, Lord. We raise it up to you, Father, and worship you and give you thanks. We thank you for our pastor that brings the word to us that's true and honest. And we can everything in this word, your word, that he gives to us from you. Lord, we just thank you for this church and for the opportunity we have to praise you and worship you. To be here with brothers and sisters in Christ, just to worship you, to feel the love and comfort and warmth for each person that's here. And to sing the songs like we sang, sing every song. He's coming. Our Savior is coming. And I pray that each and every one of us will be ready. Lord, we ask your blessings now in this time, during the offering of gifts and tithes, and we just pray that you lead us away to be used for the honor of your kingdom. And we thank you for each one of them that's present that can give. These things are Savior Christ Jesus' name. We pray.
so thankful that all of you are here with us this morning. I do want to just give a little special welcome. I'm glad Ms. Dot's here with us this morning. I'm so glad you got to come with me. We're glad to have you. And Darren, man, this makes 3 weeks in a row. I'm just saying, there's something to praise God for out there. That's awesome. I'm very excited for this. But to start off today, you can be turning to James 5 in your Bibles if you want to. And start off, I'm going to give you a little story. I had a question about this as I was studying through this. Anybody in here had sickness drive you to prayer? Anybody ever been there? Now, sometimes that can be funny, right? Because sometimes that's literally just like, for me, I'm a baby when it comes to getting sick. And so when I get anything with a stomach something, that's it for me. I'm begging Jesus to come and save me. Just deliver me from this, help me. It's funny. I've gone to, God's blessed me with a little bit to go on a lot of mission trips. I've been to several countries to go and do things like evangelism and building buildings and helping build churches and things like that. It's been amazing getting to see what God's doing in other parts of the world. But I've twice gone to Mexico. The first time I went to Mexico was in 2012, maybe something like that. I went to a city called Oaxaca, Mexico. It's in the state of Oaxaca. And we went there to go and be a part of planting a church. This was the city we were in. It had almost 0% of their people went to the evangelical church. We were helping do some church planting and things like that. We knew the rules, and so when you're traveling abroad, there's a lot of places where they'll say, don't drink the water, don't eat any food that's been washed in the water, don't eat fresh stuff. You make sure if you're drinking something, it comes out of the bottle that's sealed and things like that. We all knew these things. Well, this one place we were working at, the site that I was at, we were doing a sports camp and teaching English. And so those are the two things we were doing to kind of help bring people in to help them learn about the church plant we're sponsoring. And the pastor's there, and he was meeting these families. And we were expecting to have maybe 5 or 10 kids, and we ended up with, I think at the end of it, we had 75 children showing up daily. It was insane. We weren't prepared for it, we weren't ready for it, and we kind of had to think on our feet. We had to split our group up and have the older kids in one section, the younger kids in one section, and flip-flop. Anyways, it was just busy. The pastor was so excited about seeing this kind of a turnout for families that he could go and reach out to and get their information from. He wanted to do something special for us. So one day he comes in and he has this plate that he wants to give to me and the other leader that were there. And he asked if we wanted to share it, we could, but he really wanted us to have it. It was this plate with plantains that were cooked and then this like sweet sauce. It looked delicious. It looked awesome. Now I knew, don't eat this. I knew it. But I also did not want to offend this pastor because food is not an easy thing to come by. This was a very poor place that we were in. And so I was like, okay, Jesus, I'm taking one for the team. I'm going to do this. Help me out. So I ate it. And now let me say this at the beginning. They were delicious. It was so good. It was great. That night, as we're all going to bed, all of a sudden, I woke up with a fever. It was well over 100. I was out of my mind. I was having hallucinations of things in the room. I was scared to death, but I was so delusional that I didn't even know to say anything to them. We had a couple nurses there, I didn't tell them, and I stayed up for about, I think 6 or 8 hours of just this misery of thinking that there was stuff around me and seeing things and sweating and having all the stomach problems you can imagine, and it was nightmares. It was awful. And I remember just praying, Jesus, please help. Help me. I don't want to die here. I was so scared. Well, by that morning it was over and I was okay. Nobody else got sick even. And I was like, okay. Now I didn't eat much for the rest of that trip. And I didn't want Mexican food for a little while. When I came back and I told Ashley it's going to be a little while for me. But I got through it. So after that, we kind of changed our locations and things happened. And we ended up being in Romania for a couple of years after that, doing some of the same type of work there, and everything was good. Well, then God opened the door for us to go back to Mexico, to a different place called Jalapa, Mexico. It's in the Veracruz state of Mexico, and He opened the door for that to happen. This was in 2015, and I was like, okay, God, let's do this. And there's nothing to it. It was the right thing. We went and we had a very successful trip. We did a lot of really good things. But one of the things was that the missionary we had there was very confident in the cleanliness of the food that we were eating. But we were literally eating at a street vendor. And so this was somebody who set up a little place with a little stove to cook on the street. And he's like, oh no, I eat there all the time, it's fine. So we ate there, and then this one, and it was good food, it really was. And then, but this one evening he had us go to this woman's house who owned this little shop. And she was going to serve us at her house. She really wanted to do it for us. She wanted to serve our team. She wanted to love on us. And so she cooked this soup at her house. That next day, about maybe among, I think, 2 or 3 others, woke up feeling pretty sick. And it was this, again, this fever that came along with things. Long story short, we had 26 people go on this trip. 25 of us ended up being very, very ill. This was on our day of traveling. So this is the day, we had one day where we were supposed to go out and have like some fun, and then the next morning at 4 in the morning we were traveling back to America. And during this 24-hour period, we go from no one sick to 25 people very, very ill. We find out later that what we had was something called Shigella. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It's a bacteria you can get. It's a reportable illness by the FDA. They want to know when it's coming around. I mean, it's a big deal. This is not something you want. The other thing about it is it's highly, highly contagious. And that's really why they want to know this. Now, we didn't know this. What we're thinking is we've all gotten food poisoning, right? So we're thinking this is, something, the normal run-of-the-mill thing where we're sick, but whatever. So we get everybody together, and we're saying, as we're loading up and getting everything, at the moment of us leaving, we had about 5 people had just come back from the hospital in Mexico, getting fluids put into them and all this stuff. And we're sitting here, and we just have a powwow, and I said, guys, I know you're sick. I know you feel miserable. But for the love of Jesus, look like you're not sick in order to get on the plane. We don't want to stay here for our medical treatment. Our flight went to Texas and then back. I said, I'll stay in Texas with you for a month. I don't care. But please get on this first flight. And so, man, they manned up and they all tried their best and they looked good. They tried to just look tired and nobody really acted like anything. And we ended up getting on this flight. We make it in and nobody ends up staying in Texas. They all were like, well, if we made it this far, let's go. And then we find out that those poor people on the flight with us, we probably infected 2 full planes full of people with Shigella, and I'm sure they hate us, and I still feel bad. But I'm telling you, there were so many prayers being said for sickness at that moment. That's the worst I've ever felt in my life. It was awful, awful, awful sick. And sometimes when you're sick, you're driven to this prayer, right? And then, when you get a little cold, you might not pray and say, Jesus, take my cold away. But, when you're really sick, doesn't it drive you to your knees? You're saying, all right, God, help me. This is a big deal. And especially when you're really sick, you're telling people, and when people see you and you're really sick, and they're like, oh, I need to pray for you. You look awful. And so that's what sickness is supposed to do. It should drive us to prayer to God. We're going to read about what that looks like here in just a moment. We're going to go through, this is something that should always alarm you. If I have a message that is based on a single verse, it's because there's a lot of information I want to go through. So I got a nice big clock. I know Ronnie's already pointed to me. We did dress alike today. We did that for you guys. I called him and asked him what color jacket he was going to wear. I'm teasing. But we're going to go through this. And I'm excited about what this information is. It's difficult, it's hard stuff that we don't really talk about inside the Baptist church, but we're talking about it today. We're going to talk about when God heals. And so I'm very excited about that. But we're going to be going through James chapter 5, verse 15. And before we start, I want to pray and ask God just to open our hearts up. Lord, as we talk today about your power to heal, I pray that you give us an open mind to the awesome power you have. God, I pray that this morning you help us to gain, if we don't already have one, or renew a right view of you. How big and great and good you are. Lord, help us to have a right view of ourselves, knowing that without you we're nothing. God, help us to understand that you perform amazing things in our world for us to see who you are. For us to be drawn nearer to you, and for us to trust you with our greatest struggles. Help us to do that this morning as we study this passage. In your name I pray. Amen. So James chapter 5, verse 15 says, and the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up. and if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. So not a very long passage, but we're going to walk through it a little bit. So this first thing that it says, the prayer of faith, that word prayer is the word euche, and it means to speak or to make requests to God, to ask something of him. It's the most general term that's used for prayer inside of the New Testament. You see this over and over again. It's pretty all-encompassing. So it's when you're going to God with something, going to God saying, God, hey, I have something. I'm coming to you with a need. So any prayer that acknowledges God as God pretty much falls in this category. So the biggest requirement for prayer in this sense to take place is recognizing that there is a God that is bigger and greater than everything, that you go to him asking for a request, that you go to him in servitude, acknowledging him as the God of the universe. The word faith, you see this a lot in the New Testament, it's the word pistis, and it means to believe to the extent of complete trust and reliance. So this requires us to have a right view of God. For it to even be possible, for us to have a prayer of faith, we have to have a view of God, of him being who he is. We have to view God as the creator and sustainer of everything in the world. We have to know that he's omnipotent, all-powerful, that he's omniscient, that he's omnipresent, and that he loves humanity whom he created. So that this right view of God is required for us to have a prayer of faith. A prayer of faith requires me to say, all right, I know that God made everything, that it's all his, that everything is only still in existence because he continues to make it be so, that he sustains all of creation. I have to understand that he is absolutely all-powerful. He can do absolutely anything that he wills, that he knows absolutely everything, and that he's absolutely everywhere. And so when I know those things about God, and then also understand the fact that he loves me, and in fact that he loved me enough to send his son to die on the cross to restore my relationship with him, that's what faith is. And so when we have a prayer of faith, it's when we go to God with the right view of him, a right view of ourselves, and lay a burden at his feet. Because you see, the thing is that when you know God, you know you can have absolute faith in him, right? You know you can have full and complete trust in God when you know who he is, when you understand more about him, when you see what great lengths he went to restore our relationship with him. Faith is easy. Now, it's not easy to remain in our faith, but when we think about it, we see God and we know who he is, it's easy to begin that faith, isn't it? Because, man, who wouldn't have faith in God? Who wouldn't trust in the guy who created absolutely everything and sustains life and then loved us enough that even though we sinned and left him, he draws us back to himself in love. And so that's the thing, is that we have to have that right view of him for this faith. And this prayer of faith equals that I have a right view of him and a right view of myself, which means that I understand that I'm pretty weak. I know that nothing I do can come with my own power, that I woke up this morning only because the God who's the sustainer of everything allowed me to. That he gave me the breath in my lungs and gave me the will to walk out, and he gave me all those things, and that is why I was able to get up. And so a prayer of faith means that I understand who God is, who I am, and then I have this faith in saying, hey God, I've got something I need to lay at your feet. Now, sickness is kind of what this is really talking about today, and so we're going to look at it inside that view. Sometimes we all have sicknesses in our lives where we go to God and say, God, I know who you are, and I know who I am. And this is bigger than me. I need your help. But he says, so the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick. When it says will save, it's the Greek word sose, and it means to cause someone to be well again after having been sick, to deliver him from a direct threat. This word is mostly used to speak of someone being healed from their deathbed or a very serious illness. Saving someone from something that they had no power to save themselves from. See, the thing about sicknesses is one of the things that quickly reminds us of our place inside of God, right? I can think when things are going well that I don't need God. I can have this thought that I got up this morning because I wanted to, and I can go and walk across the stage here because I felt like I could and I wanted to do it, and it's my will that continues me going. But when I'm really sick, I'm brought back to keen awareness that I'm not able to do very much. And that it is God who does the great things, and I have to trust him in those. And so this is talking about somebody who's sick to the point of being on their deathbed, sick with something that makes them feel like they can't go on, sick to a point that has put them down out of life. This, and again, actually, to define sick, because this is talking about how you save that person, what that healing is, that the prayer of faith will save, and that means that this saving someone from something very serious. The word sick is the word kamnonta, and it means to be ill with the possible implication of being worn out or wasting away. So this word too helps us see that we're dealing with a serious illness. Last week we talked about this, about coming and being anointed by the elders and seeking their prayer inside of the church, or going with the elders, going out to the people. We talked about the oil and what that means and what that's for, that it's the oil is for us, that it's not something God needs, but it's to help us have faith in His ability to heal. And we talked about that seeking that was not talking about a common cold. It was talking about something where someone was literally wasting away. That they're on their beds, they can't get up, they can't go on with life because of this sickness that has made them realize how weak they truly are. The hardest part of this passage so far for me is not the miracle itself. Because trusting that God can heal sick people is fairly easy, I think, right? Especially for anybody who's been in church for any length of time. You think, well, of course, God, if I know anything about God, I know He's all-powerful, I know He can do absolutely anything He wants, trusting that He could heal somebody is very easy to get to, right? I think almost every Christian says, yes, God can heal, absolutely can. And so that's not the hard part for me in here. The hard part of this passage, at least this far, is the inevitability of this healing. Because what it says is the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick. Now, you and I have all been in situations, though, when we have prayed for others and they've been sick and we didn't see them healed. Right? We've been there. We've had people in our lives, I've had family members I've prayed for that God would heal them, and they died anyways. So what does that mean? How do I take that? There are some people who will say that what that means is you obviously didn't have enough faith. Had you had enough faith, then that person would have been saved. And I think that's a pretty bad way to think about this passage. I don't think that lines up very well with the rest of Scripture or with God's sovereignty at all. I think that we have to read the rest of this to really understand what it means. So the next part of the verse says, it's again reading it through again, it says, and the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up. That word raise is the Greek word that means to awaken from sleep, is what the literal meaning is. It means that you're going over for somebody in a deep sleep and you're waking them up and having them rise from their sleep. I'm going to read something to you. It's in John chapter 11. I'm going to read a good section of this passage, so just bear with me a little bit. You can read along if you'd like to. John 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, in the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with her ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But Jesus heard it. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I will go awaken him. Same word there. Raising up. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. I love reading about the disciples and how ignorant they are of what's really going on with Christ and how they don't see things. Because, and again, we talked about this, that how little death means to Jesus. He knew he was going to conquer it. He robbed the sting of death, and he already diminishes the power of death because he always calls, or not always, but he regularly calls death sleep. And it's because Jesus has no fear of death. But he is not, but they don't understand that what he's saying is when he says Lazarus is asleep, Lazarus has died. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking a rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas called the twin and said to his fellow disciples, let us go, that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. And Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Same word. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming to the world. I'm going to skip ahead to verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. And Jesus said, take the stone away. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, because he has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, his face wrapped with the cloth. And Jesus said to him, unbind him and let him go. We see this picture of Jesus talking about sleep. Lazarus was dead, and Jesus calls him up from the grave. He tells him, he says, wake up. He awakens Lazarus from sleep. What Jesus is calling sleep is it's death. It's such an amazing, miraculous picture. This is one of the greatest moments in the Gospel of John, of the disciples getting to see the power of Christ. But here's a question. Do you think that Lazarus raised from the dead for the last time that day? I sure hope not. Because if that was the extent of his resurrection, then he lost it. Because see, here's the thing. Lazarus, what did he go on to do? Age, decay, probably get sick again, and certainly die again. Right? Lazarus didn't live forever from that moment inside of his earthly body. He still died. And the thing is that when he was resurrected after his next death, his resurrection was complete. His healing was complete. Any healing we receive on earth today is partial and temporary. Does that make sense? When God heals us here and we remain here, he doesn't make us to where we're all of a sudden completely invulnerable to pain and sickness and death and decay and the pains of this world. When God brings healing to us here, I'm still going to wake up the next morning with sore joints, right? I'm still going to go through the decay of my life. I'm still going to have pain from life. But we'll get sick again when God heals us here. We'll still die when God heals us here. But you see, sometimes healing comes on the other side of death. Sometimes healing comes on the other side where God raises us up, not heals us here, not makes us feel temporarily better, not deals with one ailment among millions that we have. Sometimes God's healing is in raising us up in resurrection out of this life, out of this body, and into complete and utter healing. Is that what we look for when we're praying for healing in someone else? No, normally it's not. We're normally looking for that temporary healing. We're normally looking for that little bit to make them better right here so they can live a little bit longer. But we get to trust that sometimes in God's healing, and ultimately His healing every time, will come through getting us out of this world that's dying in sin. And that's where we can trust this to be true, that God does heal every time we pray in faith. Every single time. But sometimes that healing is going to be through raising someone up and giving them complete and utter healing in heaven. Sometimes it's not going to be the way we want it to be, the way we expect it to be, the way we wish it would be, but it's still good, and in fact, it's better, right? If we trust God to be a good God, and we trust that what He said is true about what heaven is, then we can trust that when He takes somebody there, it is far better for them than if they remained here any longer. That healing is complete. Does it make it easy? Does it make it feel good? Does it make us able to deal with it greatly? Of course not. But we can trust this to be true, and that means everything. He goes on and he changes this, and I want to focus on this for a moment. The last part of this verse, it says, the Lord will raise him up, and if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. That word sins is the word hamartias. In Greek, hamartia is the general term for sin. It literally means missing the mark. And so it's an archery term about aiming for a part of the target and then missing. Okay, so missing entirely or missing a little. But what it means inside of Scripture is to act contrary to the will and to the law of God. It's all-encompassing. So sin is erring in any capacity. So this goes all the way from murder to disobeying our parents. Does that make sense? Sin is disobeying God in any single capacity. And so he goes and he says, if any have sinned, his sins will be forgiven. So what's the connection here? You know, it seems odd to me at first to read this and go through this thing of the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick, and God will raise him up. And so we're talking about us getting to go and pray. And in fact, Wednesday night, let me put a little plug in here. This Wednesday night, we're going to be talking about spiritual gifts, and it's going to be incredible. I'm super excited about this, about talking about giftedness and how God gifts each believer and how the Holy Spirit works in gifting. And I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be really good. One of the gifts we're going to talk about is the gifts of healing. Some people have the God-given ability, the Spirit inside of them. They have the ability to pray, and God just seems to work through them more regularly than others in healing other people. It's a beautiful thing. Is it the power of the person? Of course not. It is the power of God through prayer that He uses people to do healing. And it's such a beautiful thing. But here's the thing is that it seems odd to go from this talk of healing and of people praying for someone and them getting better, or the trust that even if they don't get better here, that God will raise them up and take them to heaven, and that we can trust that God always heals the believer, right? It seems odd to go from there to, and if he has sinned, his sins will be forgiven. So what's the connection? I think the connection is that we see in Scripture some sin brings physical consequences. I'm going to read through several passages here for a moment. You don't have to turn to all of them. I'm just going to bring them to us. It says in 1 Corinthians 11, 29 through 30, "For if anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment on himself, that is why many of you are weak and ill, and some have died." We talk about this almost every time we do the Lord's Supper here, or when we take it, because we talk about the fact that Paul is telling the Corinthian church that if you take the Lord's Supper without discerning what's in their life, and you take it in vain, not even thinking about Christ, that sin can bring sickness and illness and death into your life. In Acts 5, 1 through 11, we see a story about a couple named Ananias and Sapphira. We trust that they're believers because of the fact that God judged them for sin in this capacity. But they go to their church and they lie. They tell their church they're going to sell some land and donate all the proceeds to the church because they wanted some attention. But in the end, they actually donated some of the proceeds and kept some for themselves. Now, was what they did evil? Of course not. You can sell anything you want and keep whatever you want for yourself and give whatever. That's between you and the Lord. The problem was, the sin was that they brought that before the church, and one of the acclaim is that they gave everything and they lied to others. They were deceptive to the church. What did God do? He struck them dead. Now you look at this, and is that the normal act of God for deception in the church? No, because all of us are not dead here today, right? Let's just be honest. All of us have been deceptive at some moment in church, either by pretending we were better than we were, or pretending we were whatever. And so we're alive here today, so that's not normal. But the fact is that we get to see again here a situation where God gives physical consequences for sin. 1 John 5:17, he's talking about sin. He says, all wrongdoing is sin, but there is sin that does not lead to death. And he's giving these categories of sin. He's saying, look, God said all sin is sin. All all missing the mark is missing the mark, but there is some sin that has some physical consequences. One of the things that I want to study through next is going to be some of these churches in Revelation, but reading about one of them, it says in Revelation chapter 2, verses 20 through 23, "But I have this against you," this is Jesus talking to the church, "that you tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, and is teaching and seducing my servants to practice sexual immorality and to eat food sacrificed to idols. I gave her time to repent, but she refuses to repent of her sexual immorality. Behold, I will throw her into a sickbed, and those who commit adultery with her I will throw into great tribulation, unless they repent of her works, and I will strike her children dead. And all the churches will know that I am he who searches the mind and heart. I will give to each of you according to your works." So here's Jesus talking to the church and saying, hey, there's sin going on here, and I'm going to deal with it. This is Jesus bringing physical consequences to people living in sin inside of his church. Now, we don't like to talk about that in civilized churches, do we? We don't like that to act that way because we like to say, well, no, God's a loving God. He would never do that. Has anybody in here punished your child? Of course you have. Or your child's a brat. It's one of the two. Let's be honest, right? Either you've punished your child's a brat. We don't punish our children because we dislike them. We don't punish them because we hate them. We don't punish them because we want them to suffer or hurt. We punish our children because it will help them become better children, better people. It helps them to become who God wants them to be. It helps them to be safe. Many times what we're punishing is behavior that would damage them, right? You see your kid playing with fire around gasoline, they're going to be punished. Is it because you're angry at the kid and you want to, you know what? No. It's because you don't want them to be hurt terribly. God functions in the same way when he sees us doing things that are going to hurt us, or especially hurt his church. Sometimes there's punishment that comes. Some sin will bring direct, actual, physical sickness and death. Now, one thing I don't want to do, and we don't need to confuse this, because a lot of people teach this and say, well, yeah, it's the natural consequences. If you practice the sin of doing terrible drugs and abuse these things, then that's going to bring death to your life. That's true, but I don't think that's the same thing as Jesus bringing consequences. Yes, some sin has natural consequences themselves that will bring death, but these are some sections of Scripture that show Jesus doing something for a sin that wouldn't naturally bring that kind of sickness, right? Communion wouldn't normally make somebody sick, but Jesus says he will cause sickness to help them learn from their mistake, to help them grow. Following a false leader in the church isn't going to cause somebody to be sick naturally, but Jesus says in Revelation that he was going to cause great tribulation and sickness because of what was going on. You see, here's the thing, is that in these situations, God's the one doing the punishing, like a parent with a child. Well, then that gets to a weird question. So does all sickness come from sin? Yes and no. In John 9, 1 through 5, we see a section of Scripture that says, as he passed by, this is Jesus, he saw a man born, blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he is born blind? Jesus answered that it was not this man that sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent us while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. So Jewish belief took that thought way too far. What they believed was that all sin was directly caused by death, and so if somebody was born with an illness, or all sickness was directly caused by sin. I think I said that wrong. And so they believed all of it, no matter what, was directly caused by sin. And so if somebody was born with an ailment or born with a deformity, what they would say is, all right, well, somebody sinned here. Either it was his parent and that sinned, and the child was punished for the parent's sin in the womb, or the child must have sinned in the womb. That was literally their belief. This was a group, a little sect of Jewish belief that would say the child must have been just a real angry, they must have kicked their mom too much. Crockett's big about finding a little spot in Ashley's ribs, and he likes to know it must be sin, so there must be punishment for that. It's crazy, and Jesus directly says, absolutely not. It's not that his parents sinned that he was born blind. It's not that he sinned. He's blind for the glory of God. Because at that moment, Jesus got to heal this man of blindness, and so it was just for God to use the situation. So all sickness is indirectly caused by sin, right? Sin came into the world through Adam, and sickness became a reality. So indirectly, yes, sin has caused all sickness. But as far as directly, no, only some sin directly causes sickness and death. So why does God allow sickness and tribulation and things to come from sin in our lives? So that we will be brought to repentance. So that He can save our witness and the witness of His church. And what's great is that He doesn't leave us in it, because He says the one who has committed sin. So if there is sickness in your life that's been brought by sin, He's saying there's forgiveness. Not only is there healing, there's forgiveness for that. He says He'll remove that guilt that results from the wrongdoing. This comes through repentance and prayer, because His desire is always for the greatest good inside of each of us. Won't you bow your heads and close your eyes with me? If you'll remember with me from earlier in James, we read about the actions and attitude of repentance and what that looks like. The action of repentance means that you draw near to God, you confess your sins, and you ask Him to help you change your desires. And that attitude of repentance is that you come to Him in brokenness and in humility. So remembering that about what repentance looks like, and us seeing this about the prayer of faith, saving the sick, and God raising them up and forgiving sins. First question is this: does anyone in here find themselves sick? Are you seeking faithful prayers? Are you acknowledging it, like we talked about last week, being bold and brave enough to come forward and say to the church, hey church, I'm sick and I need prayer? Maybe something a little less comfortable. Are you searching your heart for unrepentant sin? Now again, I am not saying, and I want to make sure I reiterate this, not all sin directly causes sickness. So if you're sick, I'm not saying that that's definitely there. In fact, it seems to be the minority when we read the New Testament. But one thing that's always appropriate is if you find yourself in tribulation and sickness, look in your life and see if there's things that don't belong there. Maybe it's not you, but maybe somebody you know is sick. Are you faithfully praying for them? This is a struggle in the church today, because we say we're going to pray a lot, but we do very little praying. We say we're going to lift somebody up in prayer, and we do it maybe once and forget. But if we really understand who God is and what He's capable of, then what better thing could we be doing than going to Him and in faith trusting Him with the act of healing somebody else? Maybe you've heard this message today and all of it seems out of place and odd, and you're saying, I don't know that God. I don't know Him like that. I don't know a God who's all powerful, but also is all loving and wants me to be restored in a relationship. I don't know Him like that. If that's you this morning, then there's nothing more appropriate you could do than to please just come forward and talk to me, because I would love to tell you about Christ as a Savior. That He can be that God, that Father in your life. The Father, yes, that will bring punishment, but only because He loves you and wants you to be safe and whole and healthy. Lord, I pray that you just walk with us this morning inside of this time of invitation. Lord, this passage is difficult. It's hard to walk through this. It's something we don't talk about much inside of our church world. God, we talk about trusting you and healing, but we don't talk about the fact that sometimes healing doesn't come on this side. Sometimes healing is in your resurrection of someone else. And Lord, help us to trust you in that, to trust your sovereignty in how you heal someone. To trust that it's best, to trust that it's good for them, and to trust your love for us and them both. Give us the conviction to pray in faith for sickness, God. Lord, help us to search our hearts and understand that there is sometimes tribulation and sickness that comes to our lives because of sin. Lord, let us take that seriously. Let us not think of sin as something trivial that you just forgive, but realize that it's something you hate because of the damage it's done in our lives. Call us to repentance this morning. Give us the loving tenderness of a father so that we can confess what's going on in our lives. Call us to desire different things. Help us with that. And let us draw near to you. In your name I pray. Amen. Yes, please stand and respond however God leads.
Sing together hymn number 465. Number 65.
It was special. Stacey, you can come over here too. I didn't give him fair enough warning. Hey, Christian and Cecil want to join our church. If anybody else would like to, this was a little special to make sure I gave some time for them. But if anybody else would like to, we're definitely opening it up. I know it might seem uncomfortable. We don't have anybody playing the piano right now. I'm sorry. Should have worked that out with Anita. Do a little tag team there. But I'm very excited as God has called Christian and Cecil both to be here. And they're both already stepping up in leadership, the student ministry, the piano, and everything. And so, as this is something that we've already voted them in to be in our position, I'm going to go ahead and ask the church right now if it is your desire to accept Christian and Cecil in the membership of our church and be a part of our family. Would you just raise your hand and just confirm that together with God? Amen. Well, I'm going to pray, and at the very end of this, we're going to, I get maybe during the benediction course? No benediction course?
Just go ahead. Go on.
Thank you, Ronnie. See, Ronnie helps me.
Since I have no warning,
This guy. I'm going to pray, and then I'm just going to ask that if you guys would just come forward and just welcome Christian and Cecil. I know you did it last week, do it again. They can use some hugs, and it'll be good for them. So let's pray. Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for your love. Thank you that we get to study your word carefully. God, that we get to take even sections that are uncomfortable or difficult and walk through them. That we get to take these and trust you to do what you do in our hearts and in our lives. God, I pray you use your word to draw us near to you and into conviction and change. We love you so much, Lord, and thank you for Christian and Cecil. In your name I pray.